She's Jean's aunt, and my fourth cousin, and I think she's distantly related to Jeff. She came West early and had a hard time, but she's real Brooklyn Heights, and she belongs to Gramercy Park and North Washington Square and Rittenhouse Square and Back Bay too, though she has got out of touch a little, so I wanted you to meet her." Milt wondered what unperceived bag of cement had hardened the faces of Saxton and the Gilsons. Silent, save for polite observations of Clara upon tight skirts and lumbering, the merry company reached the foot of a lurching flight of steps that scrambled up a clay bank to a cottage like a hen that has set too long. Milt noticed that Mrs. Gilson made efforts to remain in the limousine when it stopped, and he caught Gilson's mutter to his wife, "No, it's Claire's turn. Be a sport, Eva." Claire led them up the badly listed steps to an unpainted porch on which sat a little old lady, very neat, very respectable, very interested, and reflectively holding in one ivory hand a dainty handkerchief and a black clay pipe. "Hello, Claire, my dear. You've broken the relatives' record. You've called twice in less than a year," said the little old lady. "How do you do, Aunt Harriet?" remarked Mrs. Gilson, with great lack of warmth. "Hello, Eva. Sit down on the edge of the porch. Those chickens have made it awful dirty, though, haven't they? Bring out some chairs. There's two chairs that don't go down under you, often." Aunt Harriet was very cheerful. The group lugubriously settled in a circle upon an assemblage of wind-broken red velvet chairs and wooden stools. They resembled the aftermath of a funeral on a damp day. Claire was the cheerful undertaker, Mrs. Gilson the grief-stricken widow. Claire waved at Milt and conversed with Aunt Hattie in a high, brisk voice. "This is the nice boy I met on the road that I think I told you about, Cousin Hattie." The little old lady screwed up the delicate skin about her eyes, examined Milt, and cackled, "Boy, there's something wrong here. You don't belong with my family. Why, you look like an American. You haven't got an imitation monocle, and I'll bet you can't talk with a New York London accent. Why, Claire, I'm ashamed of you for bringing a human being into the Boltwood Gilson Saxton tomb and expecting—" Then was the smile of Mrs. Gilson lost forever. It was simultaneously torpedoed, mined, scuttled, and bombed. It went to the bottom without a ripple, while Mrs. Gilson snapped, "Aunt Hattie, please don't be vulgar." "Me?" croaked the little old lady. She puffed at her pipe and dropped her elbows on her knees. "My, ain't it hard to please some folks." "Cousin Hattie, I want Milt to know about our families. I love the dear old stories," Claire begged prettily. Mrs. Gilson snarled, "Claire, really—" "Oh, do shut up, Eva, and don't be so bossy," yelped the dear little old lady in sudden and dismaying rage. "I'll talk if I want to. Have they been bullying you, Claire? Or your boy? I tell you, boy, these families are fierce. I was brought up in Brooklyn, went through all the schools, used to be able to misplay the piano and mispronounce French with the best of 'em. Then Jean's pa and I came West together. He had an idea he'd get rich robbing the Injuns of their land, and we went broke. I took in washing. I learned a lot. I learned a Gilson was just the same common stuff as a red shirt miner when he was up against it. But Jean's pa succeeded. There was something about practically stealing a fur schooner, but I never was one to tattle on my kin. Anyway, by the time Gene come along, his pa was rich, and that means aristocratic. This aristocracy west of Pittsburgh is just twice as bad as the snobbery in Boston or New York, because back there, the families have had their wealth long enough. Some of 'em got it by stealing real estate in 1820, and some by selling Jamaica rum and niggers way back before the Revolutionary War. They've been respectable so long that they know mighty well and good that nobody except a Britisher is going to question their blue blood. And oh my, what good bluing third generation money does make. But out here in God's country, the marquises of milling and the barons of beef are still uneasy. Even their pretty women, after going to the best hairdressers and patronizing the best charities, sometimes get scared lest somebody think they haven't either brains or breeding. So they're nasty to all low pussons like you and me, to make sure we understand how important they are. But lands, I know 'em, boy. I'm kept pensioned up here, out of the way, but I read the social notes in the papers and I chuckle. When there's a big reception and I read about Mrs. Vogelin's pearls and her beautiful daughter-in-law, I remember how she used to run a boarding house for miners. Well, I guess it's just as shoddy in the East if you go far enough back. Claire, you're a nice comforting body, and I hate to say it, but the truth is, your great-grandfather was a hostler, and he made his first money betting on horses. Now, I oughtn't to tell that. Do you mind, dearie?" "Not a bit. Isn't it delightful that this is such a democratic country with no castes?" said Claire. At this, the first break in the little old lady's undamnable flood, Mrs. Gilson sprang up, yammering, "The rest of you may stay as long as you like, but if I'm to be home in time to dress for dinner—" "Yes, and I must be going," babbled Saxton. Milt noted that his lower lip showed white tooth marks. It must be admitted that all of them rather ignored the little old lady for a moment. Milt was apologetically hinting, "I don't really think Bill and I better come to dinner this evening, Mrs. Gilson. Thanks a lot, but it's kind of sudden." Claire again took charge. "Not at all, Milt. Of course you're coming. It was Eva herself who invited you. I'm sure she'll be delighted." "Charmed," said Mrs. Gilson, with the expression of one who has swallowed castor oil and doubts the unity of the universe. There was a lack of ease about the farewells to Aunt Harriet. As they all turned away, she beckoned Milt and murmured, "Did I raise the dickens? I tried to. It's the only solace besides smoking that a moral old lady can allow herself after she gets to be 82 and begins to doubt everything they used to teach her. Come and see me, boy. Now get out, and boy, beat up Gene Gilson. Don't be scared of his wife's hoity-toity ways. Just sail in." "I will," said Milt. He had one more surprise before he reached the limousine. Bill McGolwey, who had sat listening to everything and scratching his cheek in a puzzled way, seized Milt's sleeve and rumbled, "Good by, old hoss. I'm not going to butt in on your game and get you in Dutch. Gosh, I never supposed you had enough class to mingle with elites like this gang. But I know when I'm in wrong. You were too darn decent to kick me out. Do it myself. You're the best friend I ever had, and good luck, old man. God bless you." Bill was gone, running, stumbling, fleeing past Aunt Harriet's cottage, off into a sandy hilltop vacancy. The last Milt saw of him was when, on the skyline, Bill stopped for a glance back and seemed to be digging his knuckles into his eyes. Then Milt turned resolutely, marched down the stairs, said to his host with a curious quietness, "Thank you for asking me to dinner, but I'm afraid I can't come. Claire, will you walk a few blocks with me?" During the half minute it had taken to descend the steps, Milt had reflected, with an intensity which forgot Bill, that he had been selfish, that he had thought only of the opinion of these nice people regarding himself, instead of understanding that it was his duty to save Claire from their enervating niceness. Not that he phrased it quite in that way. What he had been muttering was, "Rotten shame, me so scared of folks' clothes that I don't stand up to 'em and keep 'em from smothering Claire. Lord, it would be awful if she settled down to being a Mrs. Jeff Saxton. Got to save her, not for myself, for her." It may have been Aunt Harriet, it may have been Milt's resolution, but Mrs. Gilson answered almost meekly, "Well, if you think would you like to walk, Claire?" As he tramped off with Claire, Milt demanded, "Glad to escape?" "Yes, and I'm glad you refused dinner. It really has been wearing, this trial by food. This is the last time I'll dare meet the Gilsons. And I'll have to be going back east. I hope the Gilsons will forgive me some day. I'm afraid you didn't win them over by Aunt Hattie." "No, they're probably off me for life. Oh, these horrid social complications. Worse than any real danger. Fire or earthquake. Oh, these complications, they don't exist. We just make them, like we make rules for a card game. What the deuce do we care about the opinions of people we don't like? And who appointed these people to a fixed social position? Did the president make Saxton High Cockalorum of dress suits or something? Why, these are just folks, the same as kings and coal heavers. There's no army we've got to fight. There's just you and me, you and I. And if we stick together, then we have all society. We are all society." "Yes, but, Milt dear, I don't want to be an outcast." "You won't be. In the long run, if you don't take these aristocrats seriously, they'll be all the more impressed by you." "No, that sounds cheering, in stories and in these optimistic editorials in the magazines, but it isn't true. And you don't know how pleasant it is to be in. I've always been more or less on the inside, and thought outsiders dreadful, but oh, I don't care. I don't care. With you, I'm happy. That's all I know and all I want to know. I've just grown up. I've just learned the greatest wisdom, to know when I'm happy. But Milt dear, I say this because I love you. Yes, I do love you. No, don't kiss me. This is too, it's far too